Welcome, everyone, to the Beyond Physio podcast. A little bit of a rebrand, and some of the things we're going to focus on are topics related to health, nutrition, and generally people that are trying to live a healthy lifestyle, fitness, rehab. We're going to be talking to some experts about different topics, but today our topic is going to be bulking and cutting. A bit of a controversial topic, depending on the people that you talk to. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, on the interwebs about how to do it right, what not to do. So we're gonna work through some of those things.
Absolutely, and this goes along with our Beyond Physio aspect of all things health and wellness, and we see a lot of athletes, adolescent who are involved in sports, and there's a few sports that come to mind that participate in either a bulking season or a cutting season. And with bulking and cutting, both have their place in sport to help certain aspects of sport performance excel, but there's a responsible way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, some of those sports, you hear this a lot from football players. They need to bulk up for the season. And, we see this from people that are power lifters, also people that are into bodybuilding. And you see kind of the negative effects of they're cutting in wrestling and in other sports like figure skating, which I actually have a lot of experience with in terms of people in both those sports, wrestling and in figure skating professionally, not myself, but treating a lot of professional figure skaters in the past. And diet restriction and how it ties into their sports performance is very, very controversial and really needs to be looked at in a very careful way.
Absolutely. So maybe we should talk a little bit about, for our listeners, what a bulk is and what a cut is.
Exactly.
In relation to what we're talking about in terms of sports performance.
So, I mean, when we're talking about, there's a difference between having an eating disorder and going through a bulk and a cut cycle, right? A lot of people on the internet are saying, you should never be bulking, you should never be cutting because it might cause people to have eating disorders. Eating disorders is another topic that we're going to be covering. But right now, during this podcast, we're just going to be talking about healthy cutting and bulking. We're not going to dive into the whole eating disorder aspect of it. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. And we would love to address them. We would love to talk about them. And we're actually, in a couple of weeks, going to have a guest who is an expert in adolescent eating disorders. And it kind of ties right into what we're talking about. But today, all we're talking about is healthy cutting and bulking. So let's explain what bulking and cutting is.
So a bulk or cut, either one, it's a strategic way to plan your nutrition to optimize performance in one way or another. So if we're talking about bulking, that is a strategic surplus in caloric intake as you are eating to gain or to optimize hypertrophy or muscle gain. The idea is sometimes mass gain as well. So if you are in Olympic weightlifting, wrestling, other sports that require a massive amount of strength and power, a bulk may be beneficial, or at least a bulking season may be beneficial to facilitate that hypertrophy and muscular growth for that sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so what we're talking about is during a bulking season, people change their diet to facilitate lean muscle growth, But with that, you can get some other side effects in terms of overall weight gain. But the objective usually is to increase weight and increase muscle size. That is generally what the goal of a bulk season is.
Sure. Right. As opposed to a cutting season, which is another strategic plan to your nutrition. But now we're talking about a caloric deficit where the main purpose of that is to lose as much weight as possible while maintaining lean muscular mass.
Yeah. So they're trying to lose as much fat as possible
Sure. Yeah.
while maintaining as much lean muscle mass as possible. So you'll see like guys that are like shredded, right?
Mhm.
They have a lot of muscle, but they have very little fat tissue underneath their skin. So you see all the that's what ripped means,
Right. And this is more beneficial for those. So for those who are trying to attain a weight class for Olympic weightlifting, for wrestling, even endurance running and things like that, if you are trying to now you have gained as much hypertrophy and muscular mass as possible, and now we are trying to make your body composition as light as possible while still maintaining that muscular strength that you've gained.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what are some good tips we have for people to bulk in a way that's healthy, in a way that will kind of maximize their efforts, so they're not, wasting a bunch of money on some supplements that might not be working or might not be worth it, and they're not wasting a bunch of money on food that might not necessarily help in the production of protein.
So the real easy way to talk about this is that the foods for a bulk as versus for a cut, they're basically the same. There's no change in what the foods you're looking for. So you're looking always to bring in lean protein and really calorie rich and nutrient rich foods
Mhm.
to bring in, even if you're cutting. So it sounds almost opposed to it if it's calorie rich. However, you want to get as much nutrition
Mhm.
in you as possible,
Yeah.
either for a bulk or a cut. What might be a little bit different is the calories that you're focused on, and then also the protein that you're taking in.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like see these videos of these strong men like Brian Shaw or the half Thor,
Yeah.
the mountain, and they're consuming a tremendous amount of food,
Mhm.
right? So if caloric intake needs to be uh, equal, if not more than whatever energy they're expending throughout the day, right? And if you're a professional weightlifter, you're probably lifting, 2, 3 times a day. You need a lot of calories to maintain that, right? Or your body goes through this process where you start to catabolize or metabolize your protein in your muscles to sustain like your body. So that's not what we want, right? During a season of training, when you are trying to build muscle, you need to consume a lot of protein and a lot of other nutritious foods that are going to have the micro and macro nutrients that you need in order to build on whatever foundation you're working on, right? So, in terms of protein intake, we talked about in past podcasts
Mhm.
that people that are trying to maintain or lose weight are going to have a protein intake of 1 gram per kilogram.
Mhm.
And then for people that are bulking, are probably going to be on the higher end of that, right? So like 1.5, even 2.
Yeah. So actually, and it looks at, so if you're in a bulking season, it looks researchers kind of promoted that you want to take in anywhere from zero point 0.8 to 1 gram, maybe even a little bit more of protein per body weight. And then the rest of your caloric surplus is filled with the fats and carbohydrates in your macronutrients. So, as you alluded, the first responsible step is just to find out what your basic metabolic rate is and how many calories it is just to sustain your body weight. And that takes a lot of experimenting. So, there's a lot of online calculators and things like that where you can kind of find that out, but you're really never going to know until you try it yourself and check the scale and kind of see how things are going with an active lifestyle. Obviously, once you increase anything in terms of resistance training, aerobic training, things like that, it may skew those numbers, and then you'll have to take in more calories or less calories depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing you can't do though is just start pounding a bunch of protein shakes.
right.
Like that's not going to provide you with the micro and macronutrients that you need. Yes, it can help supplement some of the protein. Like it's really hard to eat 6, chicken breasts a day.
Sure.
So if you just need some infusion of calories and protein, a protein shake can be a good option. There is a lot of research that shows that consuming too much protein doesn't necessarily help. There's also a lot of research that shows that people are saying like, oh, you're going to destroy your kidneys by consuming so much protein. That's pretty much false. If you consume a lot of protein, it would take a lot of protein for you to start ruining your kidneys. If you're having kidney issues with the amount of protein that you're consuming, it's actually probably more so you have a kidney problem, not really a protein problem. So you need to do some research. If you're going through a bulking or cutting season, like I really encourage you, you need to educate yourself as well. And you're probably listening to the podcast, trying to get some education. But depending on your body, everyone's individual. You should do the research, look at some protein calculators, and experiment with yourself. See, what you get results with. And you have to be exercising. You can't just consume a bunch of protein shakes and think you're going to go through bulking season. You have to exercise, and you have to be lifting weights, and you have to be lifting heavy weight.
Yeah.
Right. You can't be using no dinky like pink
right.
dumbbells.
Yeah. You got to turn that protein into muscle and use it.
And the only way to do that is by exercising hard.
Right.
Right. So bulking season, a lot of people during the winter, they're like, oh, I'm going through bulking season. I'm not going to really do much. I'm going to just eat this pint of ice cream every day.
And it's not an excuse to do what we call a dirty bulk, which is a
McDonald's every day.
High calorie, but maybe not nutritious, intake of nutrients, I guess. We'll use nutrients loosely.
Like, listen, like you could do that. Like,
you could. It's not good for you.
Just don't.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And really looking on adding about 10 to 20% of your calories that just is required to maintain your body weight, and then that's your surplus.
Yes.
We've heard the old adage of 3,500 calories equals 1 pound, and that's equal for bulking as well as cutting. A lot of people put a lot of onus on that for the cutting season. And for cutting, same idea is that you are trying to deplete or restrict 500 calories off of your intake that just is responsible for your everyday weight maintenance. If you detract 500 calories from there, now you're in a deficit. However, you do have to increase your protein intake. And this is kind of interesting that it may be more than the people in a bulking season, where now you're at 1 gram, maybe 1.5 grams, because now you're in a state of catabolism. You're now in a cannibalism. Right, exactly. You're in a state of breaking things down, and what your body will naturally want to do is start to deplete from your muscle stores, and that's the last thing that you want to do, especially if you're doing this for optimizing performance. So you have to take in that much more protein to support that lean muscle mass as you're depleting those adipose, stores and fat stores.
And a lot of people, they also make the mistake of like saying that they're cutting, but they're actually just dehydrating themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they start to limit. Listen, there's bodybuilders out there. I'm not saying that bodybuilders will look the way they do for specific reasons. I'm not gonna, attack that whole world.
Mhm.
But you, as an everyday person, if you're trying to lean out, right, the last thing you want to do is dehydrate yourself in order to get there,
Mhm.
right? One, it's not sustainable, right? If you're, if you're Hugh Jackman and you got a Wolverine movie coming up, maybe you're going to dehydrate yourself for a couple of the scenes,
Sure.
right? But if you are a regular everyday person, dehydrating yourself, one, is not sustainable. Two, is very dangerous.
Mhm.
And three, it's going to mess with things long term in terms of your health.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to lead to issues with your kidneys. It's going to lead to issues with mental fatigue and brain fog. Dehydration has a whole cascade of issues associated with it. So, kids out there and lay people, I watch these talk show things, and Henry Cavill was talking about this scene in Witcher,
Mhm.
where he's on scene for he's in the bare chested for 30 seconds,
Mhm.
and he was breaking down all the work that went into that 30 seconds of him being shirtless in that movie. The reason why a lot of those people look like that in the movies is because they're dehydrating themselves. They have nutritionists, personal trainers working with them around the clock for them to look like that. It is not realistic for everyone to look like that. So in terms of your goals for cutting, you should also be realistic in what you hope your body to look like. But if you're cutting for sports and other activities, then those goals also have to come into mind. But generally speaking, dehydrating yourself and doing these crash diets are the worst thing you could possibly do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not good for your joints, bones, liver, all the things you just said. Yeah.
So what are some good ways to cut? And we talked about the caloric deficit. What are some other good ways that people can cut kind of in a long-term scale?
Mm-hmm. So the research has kind of shown that it may be more sustainable to seek out 0.5 to 1% of your body weight decrease per week. And so if, I calculate myself as 175 pounds, that's less than a pound a week. We've heard it's healthy to search for 1 to maybe 2 pounds per week. Anything more than that is not setting your body up for success in terms of keeping that lean muscle mass on, and also keeping this as a longevity type of nutrition plan.
Yeah.
Because if, like you said, all those crash diets where you lose an
Ton of
incredible
weight.
amount, we've seen it in The Biggest Loser, where they lose an immense amount of weight immediately, but then your body comes back and actually rebounds and almost goes the other way.
Yeah. I mean, it's called the boomerang effect.
Yeah.
I think right. But when we're talking about cutting, we're not just talking about people that are trying to lose weight. We're talking about people that are cutting specifically for some sort of goal, right? And cutting is almost always just a short-term thing, right? You're cutting to make weight on Saturday for your wrestling match, or you're cutting to, look good for the body shape competition that you have. It's always a short-term thing, right? Cutting specifically cannot be done super, super long-term, because then that's just weight loss.
Sure.
Right? They're two different things. And especially for myself, in terms of my experience as a wrestler, a lot of misinformation about how to do that. And a lot of it just came down to desperation. Like, I had to make weight. So I ended up, doing a bunch of things that were unhealthy for me. So I want to just make sure that the people listening out there understand that even though cutting is a short-term thing, you shouldn't sacrifice long-term health for a short-term goal.
Absolutely. And so cutting comes with all the benefits that we've kind of talked about, where it's better body composition, continuing lean muscle mass, making weight. So now you are at your optimal strength at a lower weight or at a certain weight. But it does come with some negative consequences. So if you're dehydrated, obviously that's an issue. It, cutting can actually increase your insulin sensitivity. So that's actually pretty good. However, it can lead to depleted bone porosity. So you can lose your bone mass.
Bone density.
Bone density is what I meant to say. It can also skew with your blood values. Yeah. So triglycerides, HDLs, LDLs can be skewed, and that's the same for bulking as well. So you definitely want to consult with your primary healthcare practitioner if you're trying to start either a cutting or a bulking program. And as you alluded before, if you have any other underlying conditions, renal failure or kidney disease, or any other like systemic issues, you definitely want to consult with your healthcare provider before you start any of these bulking or cutting seasons.
We know you won't. You should.
You should. You definitely should.
So let's talk about some of these. We live in Jersey, right? And home of the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, strong. Jersey strong.
Jersey strong. And, there's a lot of regular people out there that don't care about, sports and don't have, competition coming up. They just want to look good for the summer, right? And they're like, it's beach season. I want to lose a couple pounds. I want to put on a little muscle mass. It is currently May, right? If you started now, it's too late.
Right.
Just letting you know, it's too late. Right? They say cutting season is in the middle of winter. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And bulking season's in the middle of winter too. So which one is it?
Right.
But for all the people out there that, are GTLing, going on a crash diet right before the summer hits is not a good thing. We've been saying for the past, 30 minutes, but, generally speaking, if you are trying to lose a little bit of weight during the summer so that you'll look not terrible at the beach, you need to focus on your nutrition, making sure you're not eating garbage. Unfortunately, you probably need to cut down on your alcohol content in terms of your consumption, which is hard because it's beach season. You probably want to make sure that you're hydrating properly. You need to increase the amount of cardiovascular exercise you're doing, and you need to be lifting weights.
Yes.
And you could do that in whatever form you want at the gym, but it's going to take a lot of hard work, and there's no shortcuts. So that is my 2 cents.
I think that's a good 2 cents. Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Nope. I think that's you just have to be responsible, whether you're doing it to get those abs. We all have abs in here. We just have to get to them. And most people are finding this out, like you said, okay, it's 2 weeks before I'm supposed to go to the beach. It's probably too late to start any nutrition plan.
Doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Meaning you should start exercising and eating right and hydrating properly and getting the amount of sleep that you need. And then you'll look great.
Yeah.
But every 6-pack starts with a kick. Right.
There you go.
All right. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that like button on Instagram and on Spotify and Apple Music. If you guys have any questions, just leave them in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and keep tuned. As we mentioned before, we prelude to other exciting episodes coming on about health and wellness in our Beyond Physio podcast.
Yeah, and we highly suggest you check the next podcast out about eating disorders. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. Awesome.